can you clarify what your intelligence advisors were telling you back in January and February? Were you warned about what was happening with coronavirus and the threat to this country? Should there have been stronger warnings?
No,
what were you hearing every day? In your
I think probably a lot more than the Democrats, because a month later, Nancy Pelosi was saying, let's dance in the streets of Chinatown. You go back and you take a look at even professionals like Anthony was saying, this is no problem. This is late in February. This is no problem. This is going to blow. This is going to blow over. And they're professionals, and they're good professionals. Most people thought this was going to blow over, and you can go. We did, I think, on January, toward the end of January, we did a ban with China. That was a very, I think you just said a little while ago, that was a very important step. And then ultimately we did a ban on Europe. That was very early in the process, because if you take the ban and you look at it, I was badly criticized by Sleepy Joe Biden, by others. I was criticized horribly. He said all sorts of things. We won't even say it. And then he apologized, because 2 weeks ago he put out a statement that I was right. So we did a ban, John, as you know, we did a ban. And many people, Democrats, professionals, probably Republicans, said that this would never happen, there'd be nothing, no big problem. You saw that, I think, better than anybody, Deborah. This was after the ban, so obviously I took it very serious. I'm not going to be banning China from coming in if I didn't take it seriously, and I did that early.
So were you getting warnings in your presidential daily brief?
I'd have to check. I would have to check. I want to look as to the exact dates of warnings.
This is Trump getting confronted on the bombshell report showing that U.S. intelligence agencies issued warnings about coronavirus in more than a dozen classified briefings in January and February, the same time that Trump was actively downplaying the threat in deference to the stock market. The warnings were included in issues of the president's daily brief, which reportedly traced the virus's spread around the globe, made clear that China was suppressing information about the contagion's transmissibility and lethal toll, and raised the prospect of dire political and economic consequences. But that didn't register with Trump, who regularly skips the daily brief and even reportedly has little patience for even the oral summary that he takes 2 to 3 times a week. Maybe they should have added pictures. He goes on to pretend that most people thought this was going to blow over, which is decidedly untrue. In fact, Democrats as a whole, and even a few Republican governors like Mike DeWine in Ohio and Larry Hogan in Maryland, sounded the alarms early and took extensive steps to contain the spread of the virus. The truth is that the talking point that it would blow over emanated from Donald Trump. This was Trump in January and February spouting the exact same disinformation that he's claiming everyone else was saying.
Have you been briefed by the CDC?
I have.
Are there words about a pandemic at this point?
No, we're not at all, and we have it totally under control.
How concerned are you?
Well, we pretty much shut it down.
You know, a lot of people think that goes away in April with the heat, as the heat comes in. Typically, that will go away in April. We're in great shape, though. It's going to disappear. One day, it's like a miracle. It will disappear.
They're going to have vaccines, I think, relatively soon. And they're going to have something that makes you better, and that's going to actually take place, we think, even sooner. So it's a lot of good things are happening.
You know, we have thousands or hundreds of thousands of people that get better just by, you know, sitting around and even going to work. Some of them go to work.
So while he's quick to blame everyone else, know that these talking points came from him. He even blames Dr. Fauci for apparently not knowing this would spread. But here's Dr. Fauci in February saying the exact opposite of what Trump is accusing him of.
We need to prepare for further challenges, and we will have them. You will hear about additional cases that will be coming on. You should not be surprised by that, but to realize that that is something that is anticipated when you get community spread. So when you have cases throughout the world, the way we're seeing now, South Korea, Italy, Iran, and places like that, the United States cannot be completely immune to that.
And of course, rather than taking responsibility for the fact that he was warned in his daily briefs from his intelligence agencies, Trump decided that the buck apparently stops with Nancy Pelosi. He claims that Pelosi was saying, quote, "Let's dance in the streets of Chinatown." Now, to be clear, Nancy Pelosi did not say, "Let's dance in the streets of Chinatown," nor did she do any dancing in any streets. What Trump is referring to is a comment where Pelosi tried to mitigate the very real xenophobia against Asian Americans, xenophobia that Trump himself was perpetuating by claiming that it's safe to go into Chinatown, that we shouldn't alienate Asian Americans who are already being targeted for hate crimes. At that point, there was no shutdown. And so so the worry was that while the rest of the country was still open, Chinatown would suffer simply due to the fact that they're of Asian descent. Consider too that Nancy Pelosi is not the president and was not getting briefings on a daily basis warning about the threat of the pandemic that would simply go ignored. That would be Trump. But because the buck apparently never stops with him, the fault for him ignoring warnings from his own staff about the spread of the virus is somehow Nancy Pelosi's fault. Got it. And then, of course, he points to what else but the China ban. And for as many times as he says it, I'll repeat it. A, this wasn't a ban, it was a travel restriction that still allowed 40,000 people into the United States from China, and B, it clearly didn't work. We have the most cases and the most deaths of any country in the world. It's like bragging about how well your new sprinkler system worked while standing next to a building that burned to the ground. So he can pretend that his China ban was some brilliant life-saving measure, but reality tells a much different story. The point here is that Trump never actually answers the question, which was to know whether he was warned about the coronavirus by intelligence agencies back in January and February. And that's because he knows that he was. And he knows that it was his responsibility as President of the United States to prepare this country for the outbreak. Not to pretend that it wasn't real, not to equate it to some Democrat hoax like impeachment of the Russia probe, not to spout pseudoscience like the notion that it goes away in April. It was to actually be a leader and take swift action and advocate for social distancing and ramp up testing. But he did none of that. And so now, as the United States has become ground zero for the outbreak, all Trump can do is play dumb and hope that nobody notices.